bring up my slides. So I think because of the pathology meeting, we probably won't have as many attendees as usual, but we are going to record the session here. Just bring up my slides on my other screen here. Sorry, it's doing it on the wrong screen that I wanted. Here we go. Sorry about this. Not sure why I can't see the bottom of the screen. Okay, there we go. I'll just do the screen share. Okay, can everyone see the slides? Yeah, seeing some nods. Okay, so welcome everyone. We're going to be talking today in kind of a panel format about career development and job applications. And so we've got, I'm fortunate to have a kind of wide range of panelists from different regions of BC, different areas of lab medicine, and different levels of kind of career trajectory. So we've got David Goldfarb from BC Children's, who's a medical microbiologist there, who I think also has spent some time in other countries as well. It's be interesting to get his perspective on that. Lynn Huang from AP in BGH. Hi, Lynn. And she's going to be kind of more speaking probably to the kind of early stage of her career. Veronica's kind of midway, I guess, neuropathologist here at BGH. Shazia, microbiologist in Fraser, who's kind of also kind of in the early to mid-career stage. Danielle Munier from Island Health. She's a hematopathologist that I think has just started in her staff position a few years ago. And then myself, I'm kind of mid-career and kind of can speak to. So the plan, I think, for today I'll maybe start things off with a few introductory slides, but what I'm hoping is that each of the panelists can kind of share a bit of their own experience and maybe even just their own perspectives on things that they found helpful in terms of developing their own careers and applying for jobs, but then also advice that they'd have just looking back to residents. And I think also part of this too is even once you're in a staff position, how you choose to develop your career. Any questions or comments before I go into my slides? Okay. Just first a land acknowledgement that all of us work in various parts of the province, and generally these are traditional unceded territories. So personally, the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh Nation territory. But just important to acknowledge that before we get started. So for today's outline, I'll just go through a bit of the introductory points that I thought were relevant, and then just let each panel member share their own experiences, and then we can have an open Q&A, which probably should allow for about half of the hour for the remaining Q&A. So these are just my own kind of personal thoughts that I thought were important to bear in mind. I think in general, when you're approaching your career, it's your own career. So there's really no one size fits all approach that you should take. I think take everything everyone says here today with a grain of salt and just kind of reflect to see whether you think it is something that resonates with you or not. And it's really important to reflect on what your own personal professional priorities and goals are. Whether that's kind of developing your academic resume or whether it's being just like a good diagnostician and I think also like you generally speaking can't do everything, but you should really try to prioritize what's most important to you. And really, I think a lot of times people get caught up in trying to find, one mentor to kind of be their guiding light. But I think it's really important to remember that you can have different kinds of mentors for different aspects of your career. And it's good to foster relationships with as many mentors as you find beneficial to you. And I think that all of us have various kind of, I guess, biases and other things. And so it's good to like kind of get wisdom from multiple people, just so you're not kind of just getting one person's perspective too much of the time. And it's also it's important to listen to others, but really trust your own instincts about what you think is the right way to go about developing your career. So personally, I actually started in general pathology. Some people might not know this about me. And I switched into HemePath early in my PGY2 year. That was when it was a 5-year program. Initially, I was leaning towards actually community heme paths, such as, say, in Fraser or Vancouver Island. But during training, I really grew to enjoy the academic environment life in Vancouver. So I found that my perspective changed as I went through residency. Um, I did during that residency develop an interest in coagulation testing, and there's was a senior hematology heme path person here, Cedric Carter, who kind of mentored me and kind of helped foster that interest. And I debated about whether I should do a fellowship when I finished, but with some encouragement from Cedric and a few others here at VGH, Monica Hudova, Bob Copeland, and Agnes Lee, who was my fellowship supervisor. She's a clinical hematologist. I decided to do a 2-year fellowship that included thrombosis and bleeding disorder clinics, research, and a UBC Master's in Health Sciences. And then following that, or towards the latter part of that, I applied for a staff job here at VGH, and I've been here basically for the last 10 years. So my advice, just thinking back through that path, I think it's always good to actively engage with division heads of all groups that you see yourself potentially interested in joining during your training. And it doesn't mean that you necessarily have to be asking about jobs right off the bat. It can just be more about, you know, kind of forming that relationship so that down the road you can check in with these individuals and maybe even just inquire as to how things are looking. And I think that the earlier you do this, the better. But I also think it's kind of everyone should, you should think about your own personal style in terms of networking. Keep an open mind as your interests and priorities may change and evolve. And as you can see from my path, it definitely evolved. Basically, even just starting residency, I wasn't even sure whether I was thinking general path or heme path. And even once I decided on heme path, the kind of area of heme path evolved as I went along. So I wouldn't close any doors and really try to keep as many open. But then once you do start recognizing where you're headed, then you can start to kind of focus on your interests and your research interests to align with that. I think it's helpful to try to develop 1 or 2 areas of interest or specialization. This obviously will vary from person to person. I think whether you're in an academic institution or a community-based institution, it is still helpful to have people who, beyond being a good generalist, have certain things they can bring to the table in terms of areas of interest that the group can benefit from. I would also say be thoughtful about research projects that you choose and make sure they align with your interests. So, if you're kind of more focused on being good clinically and not having too large of an academic portfolio, then you might want to do more bite-sized research projects. But if you see yourself as kind of developing a strong academic resume, then really you probably would want to take on more ambitious projects. And also think about the type of project, basic science versus clinical or quality assurance. I actually, prior to medicine, did some basic science work terms as part of a biochemistry cooperative education program. So I didn't really, even though I had some opportunities during my fellowship to do a more basic science type research project, because I already had experience in that area and it wasn't really what I saw myself doing as a staff, I was kind of more focused on trying to do more clinical, practical projects around coagulation. And so really just kind of think about where you want, what's going to serve your interests in terms of your long-term career. And so really be thoughtful about choosing your fellowship, both the type of fellowship, I mean, how you want to structure it, where you're going to go, or whether you even need that fellowship. And I don't know about if this applies to other pathology disciplines, but certainly in heme path, there seems to be more of a trend towards not doing a fellowship at all. And I think a lot of times you can pursue extra training like the UBC Masters in Health Sciences that I did during my fellowship. Eric McGinnis in our group at BGH is going to be doing that this fall while being staff. So if you can incorporate that while you're a staff, then kind of that is kind of the best of both worlds in my mind. Because then you still get that uh, extra training and extra career development, but you can do it while you have the security of a staff position. I wouldn't focus on money unless you really have serious financial strain that forces that issue. Obviously, money's still a factor, especially the cost of real estate in Vancouver, but I do think that we're all relatively well paid, and no matter which group you end up with, and whether you do a fellowship or not, generally speaking, you should be able to make ends meet. And in reality, I think the money's not going to make, like, you're going to learn to live with whatever situation you're in and whatever budget you have. So I think really focusing on professional, what's going to be happy for you professionally is important, and then you can you know just let the finances take care of themselves. And really, like, as I've kind of already alluded to, once you are in a staff position, I don't think I would view that as a static thing. Continue your career development, look at options once you're staff. I even did like a lean green belt training program while I was on staff here. And so really just kind of look for opportunities that align with your interests, and so you know take the mentality of a lifelong learner. So I'm going to pass it off to the other panelists now. I don't know about if anybody wants to speak in a particular order. Um, David, I know you're saying you're on service, so if you're available now, maybe we'll start with you. Does that sound good?
Sure. Yeah, if that's all right. Thanks so much for inviting me to present. And yeah, unfortunately, I am on service, so I may have to step out a bit later on, but I'll
Yeah. I'm on
try not to.
transfusion, so I also might have to step out. We'll do what
Yeah.
we can.
Um, but yeah, thanks again. And I might be a bit biased. I think there's a couple of interesting parts about me that I'll try to discuss in the few minutes. And I'll focus a little bit on kind of the earlier part of my career. I guess I'm well into now a mid-career person, which is kind of hard for me to grasp. But um, I'll talk what I think are a couple of unique aspects. One was kind of my training path, and then the other is, as Tyler mentioned, I did spend some time overseas, and I might get on a bit of a soapbox there as well. But yeah, I am working currently as a medical microbiologist at Children's and Women's. I also work as a pediatric infectious disease physician here at Children's and Women's. And so my training, I started out in pediatrics, and then did a fellowship in pediatric infectious disease, and then a fellowship in microbiology that allowed me to have the pleasure of sitting 3 Royal College exams. So that was kind of, I guess that's somewhat unusual to have a training path that would do that. I was very much interested in microbiology and also pediatrics and some of the developments that were happening in the field of microbiology that certainly have been accelerated more recently related to COVID in terms of access to novel diagnostics. And so it was something that interested me, and that's one of the messages I think that's important. It may seem like it's a long time to get through that, but if there's something that interests you and you're going to be doing this the rest of your life, I think it's worth the investment. And also, your job prospects. I was very much interested in pediatric microbiology. There might be like, 6 of people similar to me around Canada. There aren't many kind of positions in pediatric hospitals for microbiologists. So it kind of limits, obviously, um, opportunities on that front. But then, when those come up, there aren't many other candidates that would be able to shine in those applications. So I think that's something that you need to balance, is deciding, how important geography. I did ultimately move away. I was kind of originally from Ontario. Um, and so that's one of the considerations. For me, it was really important to be able to work in this space and have that as my career, but it does require some flexibility at times. So that's one of the compromises you have to think about. Um, and then the other aspect I wanted to talk about was, after my training, and this was something I was always kind of considering, was to work overseas. And basically within a couple of months of finishing my fellowship, did take a position at an academic institution that was new. As the University of Botswana. They had just started their first medical school in that country, and so I did go and with our family and lived there ultimately for 4 years. Um, and so that, I think, is something that I think a lot of people should consider, is the global health context. I know when you look at medical students and surveys of medical students and other training programs, there is a rising interest, at least up until COVID, in having global health as part of your career. I was just going to share one slide, um, which this is a region where I went, which was Botswana. We talk about the shortage of doctors in Canada. And yes, I think we do. I think everybody agrees. But, if you look in the global context, we're not in a horrible spot. So where I went was Botswana. They didn't have a medical school, and a lot of times there's a hierarchy. They would lose a lot of their grads to South Africa, who would lose their grads to here. And so if you look at actually the Canadian context, so this is looking at BC. We've been recruiting, and I've heard a lot of discussions about this now. We need to recruit internationally because of our shortages. And even going back 10 years ago, the estimates were around, from South Africa alone, we had 935 doctors that had trained in South Africa. If you look at the actual cost of that, so assuming a 50-50 split specialist to generalist, BC saved about $500 million by bringing those doctors into our healthcare system in terms of training. And I'm guessing we haven't spent that much to bolster the South African system over the years. So I think there is not just an interest, but potentially a responsibility of our health system to also consider supporting other health systems in the global context. And obviously, we do need to make sure that we're training enough of our own physicians to be able to support our health system. But we should also be thinking about how we can support other health systems in the global context. And so that was, for me, still remains a highlight of my career, having worked there. There, I was working as a pediatrician and pediatric ID physician, and we started a pediatric program, and I still see that as a highlight of my career, and still have involvements there, and also working with some other programs with some training in pediatrics and other areas. So I think that's something that I would encourage people to consider, that aspect of their career, and try to think about how they can incorporate that. I certainly see that as a plus. If I'm looking at candidates and somebody has some involvement or interest, I would see that as an area of focus for all of us to consider. So I'll end it there, but happy to take questions if I can towards the end.
Yeah, thanks, David. I think that'll be an interesting angle to explore a little bit more in the Q&A. Let's see, Shazia, do you want to go next?
Sure. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much, Tyler, for this opportunity. to share my experience and my journey where I am right now. So, as you, I also started my career in general pathology, but very soon I realized it's actually the infectious disease diagnostic that attracts me more, and I have more interest in these tiny creatures and how to diagnose things. And part of this may be because I am from Pakistan, a country where the infectious disease are still very high in terms of mortality rate, whether it's an infant mortality rate or a maternal mortality rate. So this was the beginning of my interest in this field. So I pursued my career by doing a fellowship in Pakistan. And as soon as I finished, due to some family circumstances, we moved to Canada. And after immigrating, I realized that if I want to work as a microbiologist, I have to do everything from zero. So that was from there, my journey was not different from any other international medical graduate. This was a completely brand new country. I have to make connections. And again, it is like you have to take charge of your career path and set your goals and then try to achieve them. So all this ended up me being in the UBC residency program finally in 2012. And then I really enjoyed my training over here. I loved the part that it was more clinical as compared to my previous fellowship. The more interactions and more working closely, whether it's infectious disease physicians or other clinicians, working with infection control team, as well as the stewardship team. And it was an interesting time because it was the time when we see a great revolution in microbiology diagnostics because the MALDI-TOF came in and we are seeing new emerging technologies having next generation sequencing or sequencing capacities in diagnostic laboratories for the hospitals and others. So that develops my interest more in, okay, how I can work on this. And as you mentioned, like doing small projects during the residency, trying to see where my interest is, and then trying to find what things I really enjoyed doing it. So I find the tropical medicine, the TB within the infectious disease is a great interest to me. Going through the rotation to different hospital sites, academic, VGH versus Fraser Health or Surrey Memorial Hospital. And then, okay, when it comes for the job, there were job opportunities. And then I have to decide, okay, where I am going to work that make difference and will be more fulfilling to me. And will I enjoy working in the long term? So I ended up at Surrey Memorial Hospital, at Fraser Health. And when I joined here, my dream was to have a good, like, same molecular laboratory as the downtown hospitals have to provide those diagnostic facilities here at Surrey. And it was a good or bad with COVID came and we got all the funding and we were able to establish money diagnostic in-house testing. Still working on that. What I learned during all this journey, and I would say to the residents is just take charge of your career path. And how you can do is first to be self-awareness and reflection. Know what you like to do. What are your strengths and what are your weaknesses? Set very smart goals for your career path, short term and long term. And see, like, can you take extra training or extra rotations or any extra experience that will help you to obtain your goals. And once you discover yourself, then it comes for searching or exploring the opportunities. What opportunities are available to you? And if they are not, how can you search for them? You need to do like a networking. And it is, I must say, the whole like laboratory medicine especially is a really small word. So wherever like you do thing at one side, the information will travel very soon to the other side. So be honest to yourself and be honest to others as well. If you are interested, show your interest, show your strength to your potential employers. And even if there are no jobs, let them know that you are interested, or ask them during this networking, like what else you can do that will make you a suitable candidate for them to hire and work for you. And then at the end, when it's the time when you are applying for the job, again, be very honest. Do not put the things in your job or CV application that are not real or that doesn't match with your interests. Because, and tailor your application, whatever the job description is, but highlighting your strength. You should not mention anything that is that you cannot back up in the actual interview process. Then look for the things that, ask yourself, will I be enjoying this job in 5 years, in 10 years? What show your potential employers that these are the extra strengths that you will bring into their program that align with their program objectives or their values. And as Tyler mentioned, do not money let your motivation go. So money at the end is not the thing that you should be working. You will realize very soon that it's the same at the end of the day, whether it's for few dollars extra or few dollars less. It's your job satisfaction and the chances for you to flourish more or again, like grow your career. It's not the money that you're looking for. So I always wanted to do tropical medicine diploma during my residency, well, which I was not able to, but I am still on track. And one day I'm hoping that I will take some time off and do this training, extra training. So happy to answer if you have any questions.
Thanks, Shazia. I think we're going to, Tyler must be, he's covering a service, so he must be busy. So I think we're going to do questions at the end of the session to make sure everybody has a chance. So thank you very much. I'm wondering, Veronica, would you be okay to go next?
Yes, certainly. And I think most of what I had planned on saying has already been very eloquently described. So I think I will keep my my part short to allow for questions. So I'm one of the imports that David was talking about. I did my medical degree in Chile. I came to Canada because I wanted to do research. So I did a PhD here at UBC. I was ready to go back to Chile when I met who's now my husband partner. And I made the very difficult decision to actually stay. And I wrote the most difficult email ever saying no to the offer that I had from Chile. So there is something also about having to say no and feeling that one closes the door while one is sort of navigating all this. So I stayed, I immigrated, I decided that I was really attracted to neuropathology as a potential residency. I was very lucky to match. I did my NP residency. I had 2 kids during my residency, and I think I want to stress a little bit about how important your personal life is in terms of your choices of, or in terms of putting maybe boundaries as to your choices within your career sort of planning. Then I did the CAP. so the clinical investigator program, and now I am a clinician. The neuropathology part is the clinician scientist here. So I can speak if anybody has questions. I'm also on the CAP committee. So if anybody has questions around a double clinician scientist career, I can answer some of those, I hope, either online like now or afterwards. And I think I echo what everybody has said. It's not, getting a job is not the end stage, it's part of the road or the journey. Try to enjoy it as much as possible. I remember when I, as a resident, attended these sessions, I wanted to know where I could apply for a job. I didn't care about the other stuff. But it's actually the other stuff, like what are your priorities? What are your principles? What do you enjoy in life? What's your personal situation that will basically guide that? And then we can help you on a one-on-one basis to navigate the rest, such as, okay, where do you apply? Where do you find the jobs and all that? So I'll leave it at that and I'll pass it on. Yep.
Thanks, Veronica. Sorry, everyone, I had to step away there. Let's see, just going in order here. Danielle, do you want to speak to your experience?
Hi, hi everyone. I'm Danielle Munier. I trained in Edmonton in Heme Path, and I'm actually brand new staff. So I just started with Island Health in July or August, I guess. So I've been out in Victoria for less than a year now, and it's wonderful, and I'm loving it. So yeah, just being at the very beginning of my career. A lot of these things that everybody else is saying, I was planning to say as well. So I'll just kind of tell you how I ended up here where I am. I guess in residency, I initially thought I'm going to be at a big academic institution. I'm going to do a lot of research. That was kind of, what I thought in the beginning. And I was doing these like basic science research projects in molecular pathology and doing like next gen sequencing stuff. And then I kind of just realized this is not really where my passion is. And I kind of wish I had done more of those bite-sized type research projects rather than these big basic science projects. Because when I was in it, I liked it, but at the end of the day, I needed a little bit more quick validation to what I was doing. And so that, it took that experience to realize kind of where I wanted to go. And so I was applying to fellowships in molecular pathology in the US and things like that. And then I heard about this job in Victoria, which sounded, I'm a big cyclist, so lifestyle wise, it was very appealing to me and to my husband. And I actually am so glad I didn't get into any of the fellowships that I applied to in the States, which I knew it was a bit of a long shot anyway, being a Canadian trained Heme Path resident to get a US fellowship. It's not an easy thing, but it actually was like the best rejection ever. I came out here to the island for an elective, and it was just like immediately felt like home to me. So that's something I really stress to people, is to do electives in other places. Like I was in Edmonton for 14 years. I did undergrad, med school, residency there. It was home. But then I came here and it was immediate. Like, this is where I need to be. My colleagues were amazing. The lifestyle here, it just felt so easy and so fitting for me. So yeah, doing electives in other places, whether or not you think you're going to have a job there, I think is super valuable, because even if there's no job opportunity or you have no intention of ever living or working in that place, there's always something you can learn and bring back. And just to have those different perspectives, I think is invaluable. Like you really can't get that any other way than by, going and seeing firsthand, these different places. yeah, so, and sometimes you don't really know what you want until you find it, or what you don't want. So yeah, it took me a while to kind of realize that I was actually more suited for like kind of a community-based practice, rather than being in a big academic center. And, I think we all train in big academic centers, so that's kind of what you know and what you're used to. And it seems like, everybody around you stayed in those places, and the kind of push for it and say, this is a good place to work. But having that exposure to other kind of maybe smaller centers, less academic type places, for me was huge. I was like, oh wow, this is actually where I want to be and the kind of work I want to be doing. So yeah, I think that's kind of my main points I wanted to touch on, is just doing electives in other places, and having that opportunity to meet future colleagues and see what's going to work for your lifestyle, I think is very big when it comes to choosing residency or choosing a job. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Danielle.
Yeah.
That's a good perspective. And I think it's also interesting too that sometimes people have the mindset of wherever I'm going to get a job, that's where I'm going to be forever. And you see some people kind of even, halfway through their staff career switch centers and types of practice. Like Doug Weber, who just retired here in AP, he was a general pathologist in Kelowna for the first half of his career. And then the second half, he came to VGH, a big academic center, and had a very, strong teaching focus. So I think that it's also important to recognize that, whatever position you're applying for, it doesn't have to be forever as well. And I think it's just good to like focus on what's going to work for you for the foreseeable future, and then just reassess as you go along. But yeah, that's kind of interesting, Danielle. You had almost kind of the opposite trajectory as me. You came in more academic and ended up more community.
Yeah.
Lynn, do you want to give us your experiences?
Yeah, for sure. So thanks for the invite, Charlie. It's nice to be here. And I certainly echo a lot of the sentiments put forth by the others talking today. So I'm an anatomical pathologist here at Vancouver General Hospital, and I subspecialize in gynecologic pathology. So I am, I think the opposite of Danielle. I'm also BC homegrown and inbred. So I did my undergrad at UBC, I did med school at UBC, and then, I was thinking about going somewhere else for residency, but then I really liked pathology and I really liked gynecology. So I was like, why not do gynepath? And there's no better center to do gynepath than to actually stay at UBC. So I interviewed here, and Mike Nemo and Monica Hudoba made a very big mistake because they interviewed me and then they let me into the residency program. I'm sure they'll have many thoughts about that. So yeah, I did my residency here at UBC, and I was never going to go into academia. Like I did research in my undergrad. It was so incredibly frustrating. And so I thought, I'm going to go work in Fraser Health. I'm never going to stay at VGH. And then I met some really great mentors here, Cheng Hen Lee and Blake Jilks and Phil Clements, and I did a lot of projects, and it kind of just snowballed. And then they offered me a job, and at first I said no, because I was like, I'm not going to do research for the rest of my life. And then I sort of marinated it, and I thought, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it now. And like what the other speakers have said, I'm going to give it a shot. And if things don't work out, I can always pivot later. And now is the opportunity, sometimes opportunities come when you don't expect it. So I'm here at VGH. I did my fellowship training in New York. And I also, like Shazia was saying, sometimes you just find opportunities. So I did my master's in genomic medicine at the University of Cambridge in the UK, and I did that actually when I was an attending here. So just, sometimes you just find ways to make it work, and that's sort of the story of life. So yeah, so that's kind of how I got here, and I will just echo some of the sentiments that were put forth. Sometimes you know what you want in life, and sometimes life just happens to you. And so you do your best that you can, you pivot, sometimes you go with it. Sometimes you have to take a bit of time to really stop and say, like, is this really what I want? Tyler mentioned, like, he did a lot of basic science stuff, and he's like, well, do I really want to do this? So no, take some time, even though you're in really, really busy residence, to really think about, what you want in life and in your career. And I would say that be really open-minded. People mentioned this before, like, take the opportunity to do electives, take the opportunity to figure out, what other people are doing. And even if you're like, Danielle said, even if you're not going to go there, it's actually really nice to just go to another lab and figure out how they do things. Do they do it differently? Can you learn something from them? That's really important. And have an open mind. I think some of the residents are really keen, like they're gonna do DermPath and they're gonna do nothing but DermPath. But you should take the opportunity to learn everything, and you never know where you're gonna end up. And the other thing I think, and it shows in this talk, is people really care about our trainees. And so it's a really good time for you to do things you're uncomfortable with, pick cases that you think you'll never be able to handle, and yeah, just do a lot of things and show up. I think those are the big sort of the big take-home messages. But anyhow, that will be my 3 minutes, 3 minutes, and then happy to take any questions after. And yeah.
Thanks, Lynn. Questions from the audience? It looks like we've got about 15 minutes for open discussion. Feel free to use the chat function, or if you are speaking, I'd encourage you to, maybe if you are able to, take your camera so we can see you, but not mandatory either. Maybe,
Tyler,
oh, sorry. Yes, Mike.
just wondering, your career change, that your choice, or were you politely advised to change into HemePath?
I was wondering if this was going to come up. So I'll just say, Mike, that you can't do everything. And as much as general pathology seemed like a really good career, I think I just had to pick my favorite and go for that part.
And my understanding was the program director was very difficult to get along with anyway. So just teasing, because I know it was definitely your choice. Just for anyone here, it was definitely his choice.
Yeah. No. And I think one thing I as much as I like to tease Mike, one thing I really found helpful was that whenever I did talk to Mike, he was always good about just wanting the best for what I felt was like going to be a good career path for me. And I think that's what you really want to look for with mentors, is people that aren't just going to see it from their perspective, but like understand that, like kind of look out for your own interest and your own perspective, and be able to kind of not really kind of tell you what to do, but just kind of give you some guidance. So yeah, thanks, Mike, as much as the sarcasm often comes through too. I see a hand up from David Huntsman. David?
Yeah, so I found this has actually been really fascinating, and thank you all for sharing your professional kind of life stories in sort of précis form. I kind of did the opposite of some of you guys. I started very general, where I was a family doctor in Labrador and ended up as a general pathology resident, and slowly became more interested in specific things until now I sort of sit on the end of a pin kind of thing. And but I just wonder whether, in terms of the future practice of pathology or different career opportunities, where do you see general pathology fitting in? Is it a sort of a historical artifact from before the subspecialties knew what they were, or is this a viable path forward for people to figure out what they want to do?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think we're training less and less general pathology trainees, but there's obviously still communities where you do have groups of general pathologists practicing. Mike, did you want to speak to this?
Sure, and I think I've discussed this before. So essentially, Tyler's already described, there's been a move within British Columbia. There's been a move by the health authorities to no longer hire general pathologists, and I'm a big proponent of not training people to do things that there may not be jobs in. So if there's no job at the end of it, and there's been a move, and I'm not going to comment on whether it's a good move or a bad move. It was just decisions made by the health authorities themselves without consultation to the programs. And from medical student perspective as well, I think pathology is developed, and the breadth of general pathology now is much larger or wider, than it was before. And certainly, if you look at the CARMS match data, the number of unmatched positions in general pathology are very high compared to the other pathology areas. So I just, as Tyler says, there are certain jobs, I think in Alberta, rural Ontario, within British Columbia, the majority, I think, typically it's because they want someone to take transfusion call. They're now being affiliated with larger and larger hospitals and have the ability to access subspecialty people. So things are more easily handled. And of course, with the increasing knowledge and technology that's available, it's very easy to share things. So I don't know that we do need people with very broad knowledge in small communities, because it's very easy to access more specific knowledge. That's just, I mean, that's a take. I can tell you that the general pathology program is currently inactive. It may just describe the program director, but generally speaking, there is less of a demand for general pathologists now.
So it's a historic feature of our specialty then, perhaps, in BC.
British Columbia, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's still a tricky one because the system still has general pathology groups that still function very well. And so it's kind of probably going to evolve over time, but it's probably going to be gradual rather than immediate.
Definitely, Tyler, because, you know, you can't just say as of, you know, January 1st, 2023, general pathologists will no longer be employed because we've decided to go. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a transition, but certainly over the last 5 to 8 years, 5 to 10 years, the trend has been away. And certainly the most recent graduates from the general pathology program at UBC, most recently, I'm not sure if Nick is on the line, but Nick Sunderland trained in general path and then went and subspecialized in heme path. And Tyler Verdun, who was the previous, went to Alberta. So anyways, again, I don't want this to turn into a discussion of general pathology.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, you do sometimes see people that will do AP +1 clin path subspecialty as well. And sometimes those types of individuals will join groups that typically would have had general pathologists. So I think there's some flexibility, and I think it's still, I think you just have to look at your own interests and kind of, like kind of Mike said, it's hard to do all of general pathology these days, but it's still, you still have to think about, you know, I guess if you know, weren't really interested in academics at all, you probably still could function in all areas of general pathology, but it would just take a lot of effort to maintain all of those areas, which is increasingly difficult. Other questions from the audience? Oh, sorry, I'm getting a transfusion call. Maybe before I take this call, Lynn, did you want to speak to your experience with AP and fellowships?
Yeah, for sure. I did a fellowship in gynecologic pathology down in the US. And I think still the vast majority of fellowships in pathology are still in the US. And so I think a lot of our residents end up going down there, and they have a very, very good success rate. You know, when I was deciding on whether I wanted to do a fellowship, I thought, well, one, is it going to pigeonhole me? Like if I do gynae path, does that mean that I'm going to be stuck doing gynae path and I can't do anything else? But I don't think that's the experience from most of the hospitals, especially in BC. I think a lot of them actually prefer that you have some sort of subspecialty training, and it just enhances you. I'll also say that I think I matured a lot during my fellowship because you're given a lot of responsibility, like you're on the hot seat all the time. And so you're liaising with the clinicians and really, really working quite independently. And I think I matured quite a bit. So I mean, my take is if you can do it, I know it's hard because life, you know, there's so many variables in life, but if you can do it, I think I would do it. And, you know, if you can't do it because of life, you know, you can always find opportunities during your early career. There's always a way to make things happen. And sometimes it's just a bit of determination, bit of savvy, and a bit of luck, but you can definitely get there.
Excellent. Yeah, and I think a lot of groups will be supportive of a person kind of dedicating some time and energy to some kind of additional training. And you just have, depends on the resources of that group. VGH Pathology has just recently started a sabbatical program, which should be interesting. And I think other groups have already established that in the past. But even if you're part of more of a community-based group, there's still, you know, I think it's just a matter of discussing it with the group. David, did you speak to the kind of international aspect and what people might be able to do if they're interested in pursuing opportunities in that?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of people already are exploring those. Trainees, I know in various programs are exploring. There's multiple potential avenues. I mean, certainly in the field of microbiology, you could be involved, whether it's at, you know, large NGOs like World Health Organization, UNAIDS, or other organizations like that. There are academic partnerships. Canada doesn't tend to have large academic partnerships. University of Manitoba has had a long-standing partnership with multiple sites, but the US often, and I work part-time as well with University of Pennsylvania in Botswana. There are some of these larger partnerships between institutions, and particularly Sub-Saharan Africa and US institutions, and also the UK has several of those, such as through the Wellcome Trust. And then I would advocate, the route I took was working with a local academic institution. So I was a full-time faculty member at the University of Botswana. I do think it has strengths. And one of them is that you're with trainees the whole time you're there. I never did any clinics or any research projects or anything without a whole bunch of trainees. And that was what I saw as a real downside of a lot of these other works, is you're often or rarely with actual local trainees. And I think that's just a waste of your time in a lot of ways in terms of building capacity. So I would certainly advocate, if you're interested in academics, I mean, there's some frustrations related to that. There's a reason why these systems are under-resourced, and whether it's managing a research grant or ethics or other aspects of academic work, it can be frustrating. But the rewards I found were quite worth it in terms of having learners and working with learners and mentoring learners. And I still am fortunate to mentor learners in those contexts. So I would advocate for that route if people are interested.
Thanks, David. Yeah, and I think kind of a lot of common themes, like one of the common themes we've had today is just the ideas that, you know, none of us have had a straight linear path. There's been kind of various twists and turns along the way. And so it's good to just remind yourself that you don't have to just do things in a logical, you don't have to decide everything in advance, that you can kind of take things one step at a time and reassess along the way. The other thing as well is I think kind of I think what's come up quite a bit is the importance of just kind of having as much diverse contacts as you can, and kind of just, you know, David's point about international opportunities being kind of maybe hard to know what's out there, you know, talk to people, and through word of mouth, you might be able to find something that is a good fit for you. And so I think just the idea of networking and kind of putting yourself out there and going to different electives and talking to different people is good. And sometimes even, I don't know if this actually got said explicitly, when you go to other sites, even if you don't get a job there, just having those contacts can be useful down the road, because sometimes you develop these networks of people in your area of specialization that you can reach out to, whether it's for, like like how do you guys manage this and all sorts of things. And these, with things being Zoom based more and more now, you can develop these networks that in theory you could broadcast across Canada or internationally. And so I think there's lots of opportunities, and I think that Shazia, do you want to add to that? I think you're muted, Shazia. Can you hear me, Shazia? There we go. Yeah. I'm not sure you can hear me.
Oh, hi. Can
Oh,
you
there
hear
we
me?
go. Yeah, now we can. Yeah.
So yeah. Now, I just want to add one thing that I forget, and I think we all mentioned good things. One important thing for the trainees and the residents is to keep their CVs up to date. And I think that is kind of your preparedness. Like anytime if some jobs comes up, your CV should be ready. So you need to have a kind of a living, running document and document everything there, and then tailor it or specify it as per the job description when it comes. So that is something that I missed, like in the initial years of training, I was not up to it. And then in the later years, when I was trying to put everything in, and it was a bit challenging. So if you are in a habit, like initially, like maybe from PGY 1, 2, just start building up your things, the small courses you take, small projects you do, teaching things you do, put everything in it there. And
Yeah.
then the things will be very easy to read.
Yeah, that's really good advice, Shazia. And I do think you can have kind of a master copy that has everything. And then, like you said, you can remove the sections that are less relevant to what you're applying for. Yeah. Anything to add from our panelists? We got about another minute here. Any final thoughts? Okay. Well, I think obviously we could talk for hours about this, but hopefully during this time everyone got some different perspectives and ideas. And I think just I think probably also I think most of the panelists I think would be open to, if somebody wanted to reach out to them just to follow up on something that they mentioned that might resonate or apply to someone else's career. But yeah, I think just hope everyone finds their way and don't get too frustrated with, the rejections along the way, because that's just part of life. But thanks for everyone for tuning in, and enjoy your spring break if you've got kids going to school here. All right. Bye now.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Tyler. Bye.